Hi, and welcome to the Monologue Project. This week we have DL from Motels by Jeff Monahan. I love that name, cracks me up. So this is actually from a screenplay. So this is actually a monologue for a film, which you don't see a lot. Like usually in films, like you have like little like a sentence or two here and a sentence or two here. So it's rare to have like a nice big fat story intact. This is pieced together from a bunch of lines, but most of the lines we cut were like, please, things like that. If you want to know fully how we put together this piece from a script, you can head over to our Patreon page, which is over there, down. Actually, it depends on the format. I could say this, but then you'll be on Instagram going, but Sammy, it's over there. So I can't help you. I'm on Instagram, but it doesn't matter. Is it one of those places or one of those places? That's where all the information will be about the Patreon. That's also where you will find information about our coffee page if you want to shoot Bruce a couple of bucks as a thank you for hitting the little buttons for us every week. Because I keep doing this later and later and later. We are doing this late on Thursday. Normally I release the monologues on Wednesday, but it was one of those. It's winter. My happy light isn't working as well as it's supposed to, and I was just having trouble dealing. And this is a tons piece, so I just needed to wait until I was a little bit more less emotionally fragile in order to get through it. So anyway, here we are. All of that said, this is DL by Jeff Monahan from Motels. My grandmother used to make cherry pies. She lived on a farm not too far from the town where I lived with my parents. There was a barn, big red barn, and a small shack where she kept her chickens, all kinds of chickens, white ones, red ones, brown, black, all kinds. My grandfather died before I was born, so she ran the place by herself. Canned her own fruit, planted vegetables, and sometimes for supper, she would slaughter herself a chicken. She'd take this hatchet out of the wood block and the chicks would just scatter like chickens do, and she'd corner them somehow in the dooryard. Most of them would sort of flutter away, but she'd always manage to get a hold of one of them, by its feet, and she'd hold it up and she'd show it to me. The look on its face and its eyes, you'd swear that bird knew what was coming. And before you knew it, she would slap it down on the wood block and whap! She would cut that chicken's head clean off. And then she'd let it go and it would run around the dooryard, blood like a fountain. And eventually it would stop running and just fall over. Useless. No good to anybody except as food, which is what its function was. Its value to her, and to me too, whenever I would be there at supper time, just the two of us, sitting at that big kitchen, sound of the ticking clock, eating her bird. When she was, 80, she got senile. Nobody knew it because she hardly ever went anywhere. And when she did, she never really talked that much. We'd take her whatever she needed. And there was a neighboring family who sometimes looked in on her. But this one summer, my father went for a visit. He traveled a lot with his job, never saw much of her. And she'd made him one of her famous cherry pies. And they were sitting on the back porch, drinking pink lemonade, and it was evening, almost dark. Lightning bugs were out, flitting around the yard. And she told him that she'd made it, this cherry pie, and that she would bring him out a piece of it if he wanted. And of course he said yes. Not because he felt guilty for not visiting more often, which he did feel guilty, but because my grandmother made the best cherry pies that ever passed between two lips, Benjamin, and you can believe that. So she went in And a few minutes later, came back out with a slice of this pie on one of her big old china plates with the little flowers on it. And my dad, he takes the fork, he told us afterwards. He takes the fork and he cuts into this pie, and he's talking to her in the dim darkness of that summer night, and he takes a bite of this pie, and his first thought is that the cherries had gone off somehow, rotted without her knowing it. And he looks down at this pie, about to say something about it, and he sees, just barely, the eye of a chicken staring up at him out of that pie crust, which is filled with chicken, raw chicken, all bloody, its innards and gizzards and intestines and whatnot, looking all red and shiny, like the best cherry pie you ever tasted. They took my grandmother away after that. I don't think my dad ever got over it. She lived a long, long time, but he never went to see her anymore. Were they taking her? I think he was afraid. I mean, I used to go and see her all the time. Sometimes I still see her.